Good morning.
Hello.
Today we are here joined by an amazing artist, Miss Lemny Perez. We're going to be talking to her about her artwork, about her journey. But first, I want to tell you guys a little bit about Anima Mundi. I'm Creatress. I was honored to be the lead curator for Anima Mundi. And Anima Mundi is a collection all about, well, it translates to soul of the world, first of all. Is Latin for soul of the world. And since we are at the tail end of Hispanic Heritage Month, which happens between September 15th and October 15th every year, it's basically the time when we celebrate Hispanic heritage, specifically in the United States, because there's a lot of people, including myself, who live in the United States or have lived in the United States, and they have heritage and roots from many of the places in the world that speak languages rooted in Latin or based on Latin. So I wanted to do something special for all of us who have that ancestry, and not just for those who have that, but also anyone who wants to celebrate the Hispanic culture, because you don't have to be Hispanic to celebrate it and to enjoy it. I mean, tacos, tamales, tortas. I won't even go on, right? You can enjoy that no matter who you are. So that's really what it was about, and about celebrating that interconnectedness that a lot of our mythology has. The Hispanic cultures have these beliefs, right? They may sound different depending on who's saying it in the myth, but the common thread of the interconnectedness of all the humans and nature, I think, is pretty commonly held. So that's what this was about. Of course, every artwork was interpreted a little bit different from the lens of the artist, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, want to say thank you to One Love Dow for making this curation and this collection happen. The collection is under the One Love Dow like collection in on Object, right, through their gallery page. So thank you for doing that. And I do want to say that 5% of the proceeds from this collection are going back to One Love Dow, and that's going to go to supporting artists and supporting more of these initiatives. So thank you to them. Thank you to Object for also sharing the collection on their front page, on their social media channels, and that always is really nice when the platform supports. So big thank yous to all of you guys, and also to Webby for hosting the open call. So with that, I want to go over to Miss Lemny, and if you could please give us a little background on who you are as a person, as an artist, how you got to this point in your career. Would love to hear it.
Hi, Creatress. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for Anima Mundi for having me as a contributing artist to the project. It was really fun to be a part of. So I'm Dr. Lemny. I'm a trained clinical psychologist. I've been in the Web3 space since 2021. I came in around in March. So pretty much what happened to me was I was kind of like a film school dropout. And I had to kind of get practical with what I was doing. My parents are, obviously, immigrants, and they're like, you have to be like practical. You're not going to be like a film director, go be a doctor or something. And so that's what I did. But I always had this kind of like dormant desire. I painted for like about 20 years, just kind of like secretly as a hobby. And then when like Web3 came around during the pandemic, it was kind of like this opportunity to have a midlife crisis and to kind of like, figure out how I kind of wanted to re-enter the world and how I kind of like reify like my identity. Understanding that I was kind of like out of balance as just kind of like providing so many services and not really speaking to that part of my soul and that spirit that said, hey, you're a creator and you need to kind of like integrate this into your life. So when Web3 and kind of like NFTs came around and the big boom, I was like, here's my chance to kind of like jump in, feet completely wet into the deep end, and to really kind of like explore that part of like my psyche. So that's how I kind of like came back into art during that time. And I've been in dabbling in the space ever since, to different degrees. So I was really happy when this project came out. I was like, oh my God, I haven't done anything like collective in such a long time. Let me go ahead and join these other artists, because I've been, having a pretty steady studio practice for like the past year. I've been, studying at the Art Students League of New York. I'm based in New York City. And I've been working with like Pat Lipsky, and she's been painting for 64 years. She's 83 years old. She's absolutely fantastic. She's a color theorist. Yes, she's pretty dope. And so like she, I'm under her tutelage, and she's really been really impactful in what I've been doing as of late. I just came back from when I heard about, the open call, I was actually in Nepal doing my first art residency, which was like super dope. And so I was out there, and I was in the middle of this revolution. So a lot of the work that I was creating while I was there was really informed by kind of like this integration of the work that I had already been doing, which was kind of like, working on the series about my grandmother, and also integrating kind of like the different types of experiences that I was having there, while kind of like witnessing like this world change, 2 blocks away from me. So when I saw Anima Mundi, I saw it like on Twitter, and I was like, oh my goodness, let's jump in. Jenny is near and dear, and I was finally introduced to kind of like webby social and stuff, and I was like, all right, let's do this. So I was actually I had already done this one particular piece, and this one piece I had done on paper maybe, I want to say, about a year ago. And it's I grew up with my grandparents during high school. I didn't want to go to high school in the city. There were too many like limited opportunities. So like I went to high school with my grandparents in New Jersey. And a lot of the things that we would do is like we would eat a lot. And so like this particular piece, when I'm thinking of like Anima Mundi, right, I'm thinking of like family, of kind of like breaking bread. And so this is kind of like one of the holidays. What I've been doing lots of is actually taking reference material and interpreting it. So this one particular piece, it's called El Pavo. So I know I'm talking about a minute. Please feel free to interrupt me, Creatress, because I can keep going.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great. I'm gonna pull up El Pavo in just a second, but I wanna know a little bit more about like your art practice at the beginning, because I know you from Clubhouse from 2021. So I feel like I've seen your journey since then, but I'm curious like how you got to it, because you said, and this is such a, like, first of all, I really relate to a lot of things you said, like your parents telling you, like your parents being immigrants, first of all, right? I have a parent from Mexico and I have a parent from the United States, right? And so, and at some point I moved from Mexico to the United States because my mother was like, we're going back over there. I like it. It's way more opportunities, blah, blah, all the things, right? So I definitely relate to the immigrant thing, and then her struggle of taking us over there, and being like, you guys, you got to go to the university, you got to take something, and you got to get like a stable job, right? Because we struggled already. Let's we don't want you to struggle. So I feel that, and I understand. They led you to studying to be a clinical doctor, like you said, but where in that process did you like say, I know you said you're kind of like, low key doing your painting and stuff, but like at what point were you like, I'm not doing this low key, like I'm going into it? Was it for 2021 or did it happen before?
So it was actually happening like right before I was like already going through like my midlife crisis. Like I was the director of behavioral health care at a federally qualified health center in California. I had like 5 clinics, like 150 staff, like an $8 million budget. It was ridiculous. Like I was working like 6 days a week. I was like, who is this? Like, like I love serving, I like to do this work, but at the same time, I'm like, hello, like what about you? So I think then I had started to transition, and I started working in Nepal, and I was working with girls who were, and women as well, who were kind of like survivors of gender-based violence, and sexual trafficking and things like that. And then the pandemic happened, so I couldn't really travel out there anymore, so like I think right before I was already kind of like stepping down from like, having so much responsibility, downgrading from working in California to like working abroad and doing consulting. And then after that, I was starting to write again because I also have a master's in writing and I've always been a storyteller. So I like kind of like, yeah. So I kind of like came back to kind of like writing. And so when I came to Clubhouse, I was actually like following my writing friends. I was like, had no idea or clue about this NFT thing. And I had met this one guy on Instagram. He's like, I think you should do kind of like digital art, like get into NFTs. I was like, I hate technology. I'm like, no, I'm not a techie. Like, leave me alone. Like, I'm a clinician, I'm an artist, like I'm all these other things, but like definitely like, like the tech world was not ever anything that I was kind of like comfortable or that I felt that was my wheelhouse. But then when I went into Clubhouse, it was like we were so friendly and we all helped each other. I was like, all right, bet. I'm gonna kind of like jump in and actually go into those other rooms, not just go into the writing rooms or into the meditation rooms, but actually kind of like go into kind of like talk about this like crypto situation, talk about this kind of like blockchain thing, and so kind of like those transitions were actually happening right before the pandemic. And then the pandemic happened, and we were like all sitting at home. Clubhouse did become a kind of like a second home, obviously, for like so many of us, creatives and, builders and things like that. So that's how I kind of like ended up in the space, like inadvertently, like, like by no fault of my own.
I love it. I love it. Just naturally happened. I didn't know that you had a master's in writing. I feel like, I mean, that's very much a creative pursuit, much more than an academic one, in my opinion. Poets, writers, music, books, like that is very much artistic. So I'm curious, when was your master's? Was it before or after you studied psychology?
No, my master's was before psychology. So like I had graduated from
Ah,
I went to the New College of California, which was kind of like in the Mission in San Francisco. This is in 2005, and actually that school closed down. Like they lost accreditation.
wow.
But they were like this like hippie school because they had like
Oh.
like, who does clowning as a degree, So it was like really alternative. So they really kind of like mismanaged their funds. But all that to say, I'd been writing since I was like 7 years old. I've kept all my diaries. It's always been I've been like I used to be a really heavy reader. So like kind of like storytelling was always something that was kind of like part of like my jam. And then like when the visual art thing came in, I was doing a lot of like, when I came into the space in 2021, I was doing so much digital work, and I was just like pumping out like really like just quick works that like, when AI came out, I was like, oh my God, like people write like doing art by hand is gonna be a dying breed. I was like, let me double down on this. And so like I started
Yeah.
taking, classes like in my community, at the local bookstore, and then I went ahead and I was taking kind of like comic book classes too during the pandemic, which was like super interesting. But all that kind of like led to, the work that I'm doing now. So it's really been a progression and it's been an evolution.
Yeah, it sounds like you've tried a few different art forms out, and that is actually also a common thread that I've found through for most artists. I think it's almost more rare for an artist to only do one thing,
Yeah.
than it is to try so many things. I think most of us just like, and we were talking about this in a different conversation. I'm just remembering it was a panel where we were talking about film specifically, but it was mentioned that like as artists, when you have a message that you want to convey, paint is not always the best medium. Sometimes film is the best one. Sometimes it's music. Sometimes it's a quick sketch. And I think what we go around doing is collecting like different art forms and different like tools, right? You have your writing, and then that evolved into, painting and sculpting or sketching and all these things. And so I just love that. And that is a common thread that I'm seeing between a lot of the artist souls here that we have, is that we like to try different things and kind of build up our tool belt.
Yeah, even for you, like I know that like you also do like some dancing when you do your performance, right? And so
A
like
little bit.
I danced ballet as a kid, like I did like my like dance rehearsal at like Carnegie Hall, like in 1989. Like who, what,
Wow.
and then like in high school I was a theater kid in junior high school as well, as part of kind of like a traveling kind of like anti-drug theater company and stuff where we would kind of go to different schools and like say no to drugs. So
I
like
love that.
yeah. No, it's totally fun. And then also like right before the pandemic as well, when I was doing my kind of like consulting work, I was kind of like living in New York, and I also took like a documentary film class at the School of Visual Arts, a continuing education. And so like I started working on a documentary about like my neighborhood here. So like you're absolutely right in terms of like we've got our feet like in our hands in like all these different kind of like mediums and like ways of expression. Like even now, like a lot of my work has like transformed into kind of like working with ceramics, which is
Oh,
also kind of like, hey, when we're little kids, everybody plays with Play-Doh, but like the most part,
oh my
it's
God, yes. Not just Play-Doh, but I literally, okay, every time I go to my YouTube, I remember this because my pinned like YouTube video is an interview that I did. And in it, they asked me like, where did you first start like with art? And I'm like, actually, like my first memory is like making mud pies with my cousin when I was like 6. And I mean, that sounds like so juvenile, but then you think about what is pottery and how is that made and how did that first get made? With mud, right? Like clay is the type of mud. And so of course, like that evolved. And I also tried pottery as well. I took a couple ceramics classes in high school and then in university as well. And it's just like I didn't know that that's what I was essentially kind of playing with when I was just like a child. So I love that. And then you with the ballet, you never know when like that dance
yeah.
is going to come into play because yeah, I just feel like it's also related. The performance art, the dance, the music, the writing, the film. I mean, it all integrates because you could write a film, you could write a musical, you can, you know what I'm saying? It's amazing. And so we just like, I feel like you and I have that similarity too, because I did some dancing and not ballet, gosh, and not ballet, but just like folklorico more than
Right.
anything. 'Cause I was here in Mexico, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, but it all informs our work even now, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I did folklorico too. Definitely, like we were like in a parade, in a Dominican
In
parade
the
here.
parade.
Yeah, y también, not only that, but also kind of like I know that you worked with like glowing glass. Like I did Marini and like hot glass beads as well, and so like it all is it's one whole big universe. Yeah.
Yes, glasses. Yeah, the beads. Actually, that was the first thing I did
Is
was I
it?
learned how to make beads.
Yeah.
And before beads, it was like the stained glass. And before the stained glass, it was like just glass design where you cut the pieces and then you just put them in the kiln, right? Like all, and then they all just melt
Fuse.
together or like,
Yeah.
yeah, like that's how it all starts, like small, right? It's like that first and then the stained glass. And then now we're going to make beads. Like now there's a flame, right? And then once I like got over that like fear of like, oh God, I got to turn on the flame and there's the live flame right in front of me and all this, right? Then my teacher was like, you should try the glass blowing class like next door. And I was like, that looks crazy. Like I don't think I'll ever be able to. But then you do it, and then it just takes someone to teach you, and then you're like, okay, maybe it wasn't as hard as I thought. It's still intense. I will say, glass blowing is hard. I think that's like the sport of the art world. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it's with a teacher, everything's possible.
Yeah, and also kind of like when these things can be kind of like intimidating. Like you and I are like like we've met in person. Like we're short people.
Yeah.
Like how the fuck is she doing that? Like it's so bizarre. Like it's just so beautiful that like there's this kind of like culture within art where as artists there's apprenticeship and it's kind of like like those who came before us kind of like are teaching the current generation and so forth. And so like I think that kind of like that genealogy of kind of like of art is also kind of something that's really beautiful within kind of like this space. So I think it's something that absolutely kind of like happened in Web3. I wouldn't have been able to kind of like navigate the technology had it not been for like us being so collaborative as we were, particularly in 2021 at Clubhouse, because I was just kind of like a fish out of water completely, and things became pretty kind of like accessible. When I think of like Webby Social, I was like,
Yeah.
it's so beautiful to kind of like still see kind of like community and to see kind of like the technology kind of like bridging those kind of like social aspects of our humanity. And this particular piece really kind of like speaks to kind of like being in my grandmother's and my grandfather's like brownstone. Everybody's kind of like passing the food around, and this is actually from an actual photograph that I use as a reference. And I'm not really sure who captured this picture. It might have been like my uncle, because he's not in it, and he was the one who always loved to take pictures. And I thank
Um,
goodness for him, because he's kind of like the historian of the family. But when I think of like this approach, it really speaks to the integration of kind of like different styles of different. I'm using pen, I'm using marker, I'm using colored pencils. There's a little bit of crayon in there. There's graphite. And so they when you think of kind of like utilizing different mediums or media, you really kind of like to integrate the different techniques, where if it's sketching, and or the textures that are involved here. This is actually like on a very tiny like little notebook. It's kind of like I think it's like 2 by 4 inches. So it's like super tiny. And it's probably like one of my I'm most proud of pieces. So when I saw that you put out the kind of like the open call, I was like, I want to put this one in. So thank you so much for accepting it.
of course, I love it. I love all the detail in it. I mean, like I don't know who she is. I was gonna say your aunt. I don't know if she's your aunt, but her shirt is like the pattern on it. That looks wild. It looks so intricate. I didn't even notice until right now that I was zooming in. And yeah, just like even like the patterns on the tablecloth. I love like this, obviously this salad with the tomatoes. Like it's so well done, and like so well represented each thing. Like this looks to me like lemons on top of
Yeah, it's like those were like little breads
like
that she was passing around.
noodles, right? Yeah.
Coming out of like the pot there from my grandfather. He's like pulling that out. Like
Yeah.
whatever that is in front of like the salad. That's kind of like the Parmesan cheese.
I love it. Oh yeah, that Parmesan with like the green one.
Yeah. So
That's
that's
amazing. I love it. It really, like, I could see myself sitting at this table. I think that's what I loved about it, is that, like, you could just feel it, especially as an immigrant, like, person with a family. When we have all our elders around, whenever we can, of course, like for these types of gatherings, like I could totally see it. And like I don't know if she's your grandma, Steve, me putting names and characters to people.
mhm.
But like this shirt that she has with like the lines,
Yeah,
like I feel like my grandma has that shirt.
right.
Like it's like a little bit red, right? Like kind of almost like red and white. Yeah, like
A little bit.
that is in okay. And the last thing, I won't go on and on, but the last thing I want to point out that I loved was the magnets on the fridge.
Oh, you caught that! I love
If
it.
y'all go, if you're Mexican or Hispanic, Latino, like you've seen these magnets on someone's fridge, if not your mom's or your
The little fruit magnets, right?
yeah, exactly. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I love it, and I'm so glad you did this. And yeah, I was gonna ask you like what all did you use? It looks like you had used pen and
Yeah.
also
There's
markers.
marker, there's pen, there's gel pen, there's colored pencils, there's graphite. But definitely like this really speaks to kind of like the integration of culture, because these are kind of like, this is probably circa mid 90s, and like we're having Thanksgiving, we're celebrating something that's very Americana, and at the same time kind of like adding, like we're not having cranberry sauce, we're like, we're having like whatever it is that's kind of Dominican, like pollo guisado, and so kind of like we're really kind of like, adding our own flair. And I think that this is true for so many like, immigrant families, and the diversity of the American culture is kind of like this melting pot, particularly, like, especially, just like I think like on the East Coast, or like this, the Southwest, or like, the southern parts of the US, like, anywhere where there's kind of like borders, and there's kind of like where people are like coming in, like, where cultures are
Right.
meeting one another, like they're going to integrate. And so like it it was just really beautiful to have kind of like our own flair and our interpretation of kind of like this American tradition, while being also kind of like American citizens ourselves, and so this is really kind of like a special piece that's near and dear to me. So again, thank you for accepting it into the collection, and it's sold. And I want to say thank you to Ibrahim for collecting it. He's super
That's right.
awesome. Yeah, and one love, and to the Webby social folks, and all of that, and to you, obviously, thank you.
Of course, yes. Thank you, and congratulations to Ibrahim,
Mm.
one of the artists who is also part of the collection. So that was really sweet. I'm super happy it's sold, and it's a one of one, which I think was a really made it even more meaningful because it is like a one of one moment. I feel like, um, and yeah, no, it was a pleasure to have it, and I love what you said about like living somewhere with a border, for example, right? And so, you said you grew up in New York, right?
Yeah.
Which is on the East Coast of the United States for anyone listening who might not know too much geography. It's right on the edge, right? And it's right near Ellis Island, which has the Statue of Liberty, which is where millions of immigrants have come through and, come into the United States, much like, people still do today. And this is also why I thought Anima Mundi was so important for this time, because as you know, like in the United States, and not just in the United States, but all around the world, there are very, very heavy issues around immigration,
Yeah.
right? People really suffering because they have to move, or they have to move and they can't go anywhere because nowhere wants new people. And it's really, I think, a matter of people forget that we're all immigrants to
Hmm.
somewhere at some point.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, instead of get down on what's going on, I wanted to find the celebratory part of it,
Hmm.
right? And celebrate that we are there and that we are here and that we're still here, and celebrate like all the best things about our cultures, because I feel like specifically like Hispanic cultures have been put under a microscope and sometimes under a lens of like a negative lens.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure we took this Hispanic Heritage Month as serious as possible, as serious to celebrate. I mean,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I'm really happy that you brought this up in your work, and it's like it's just a shared experience that we have, that coming into a new place and wanting to retain your culture and wanting to maintain your traditions alive, while also in
Hmm.
some way assimilating to the new culture that you're part of and that you have to integrate
Yeah.
to some degree. So I think that's something that a lot of us Hispanics in the United States share, and it's something that I think needed a place to be, represented. So
And celebrated for sure. No, thank you for taking the lead on this. It is definitely beautiful to kind of like participate and to see so many people contribute and to participate in who weren't even like Hispanic or from like Latino heritage. I was like, yay! It's like super diverse. Everyone is included. Because like everybody, at least with this particular piece, everybody eats. Everybody
everybody,
makes bread. And this is part of kind of like our humanity and our human culture. I think that we've been spending a lot of time at these kind of like in bigger narratives, discussing and talking about the things that are separating us or how much we're different, when in actuality, like like we're all under like one human umbrella,
yeah.
and it's kind of like it's just very kind of like we're more similar than we are dissimilar. And so kind of like this one particular piece really speaks to kind of like the values of like that's really important, which is family in every culture, and how like the relevance of a tribe and belonging, and having relationships, to each other, is super important to every nation, to every every corner of the globe. Like I don't know any human beings too many. We're kind of like collectivistic creatures. Like we're not really kind of like people are like not living alone in caves. It's difficult. Like we're interrelated and we're interdependent. and we rely on one another. So I think that, doing this collection is super important to kind of like highlight that at the end of the day, we are a common humanity, and that
Yeah.
we share a lot of values. And I think that, particularly at Pavo is really speaking to that, which translates to in English, the turkey,
Right.
so
We didn't
you
say that.
yeah.
Yeah, and we're coming right up on the turkey holiday, which I shall not name, but yeah, and it's such an interesting thing too. It's all we don't have to get into this. I do have one more question for you, but before I say that, the turkey and el pavo like has such an interesting like kind of conflicting thing for me, right? And I don't know if you ever think of this, right? But and I'm sure you have, but it's like us as the people that used to be here, right? And what Thanksgiving like is celebrating, right? And of course I've celebrated Thanksgiving most of my life, because that's just what you do when you live in the United States, right?
Yeah.
But there's that thing where it's like when you start thinking about what it really means and what it means for your ancestors, right? And it's just like, oh man, but we all eat, we all gather, and that's what I took away from your work. Not so much like that it's turkey, right? And then what that represents. But the fact that even with like the negative, maybe like history behind it, we still gather because that's what it actually is about. It's not about celebrating that thing that happened. It's like, well, this is just another opportunity for us all to get together and eat. And it's just like, okay, fine, mom. Like, you're right. That's what we're doing, right? And that's what we do. That's what we do, and it's nourishing. And I think in the end, you just make it mean whatever it is that you want. So,
And sharing in abundance too, kind of like, they kind of like there's this one particular person that if you could see is like passing the bread, and it's kind of like we're sharing the fruits of our labor. We're feeding each other, we're taking care of one another, we're loving each other. We're kind of like expressing kind of like this abundance of care, and this kind of like desire to share. And so like I think we need to share the world. Like we need to open our boundaries and borders, and create bridges and not walls. So those are my 2 cents on kind of like the current like political climate. But I mean, I think
yeah.
it speaks to all of that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for bringing that beautiful message. And I was really hoping someone would create some art with food in it, because that is very much like, I was like, oh my God, someone's got to bring the food. So I'm happy that you were able to do that for us this time. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's any other artwork that has food. So you take the prize for that one. So with that, I wanna ask you, what else are you working on that we can support you on either now or later? What should we look out for? What are you working on besides this beautiful artwork that you shared with us?
So thank you so much for asking that. I've finally incorporated and established my LLC. It's called Mahakala Arts. Yay! So I'm working on kind of like all of the business things, building the website and kind of like making the artworks accessible so that people can purchase it. I think that I've been in the space a lot and I've put some things on the blockchain, but I've taken like a break from it. So now I will definitely kind of like make a platform where people can come in and buy the editions and buy the prints, and then actually buy like the original artworks. I'm actually doing a show here in the city on Saturday.
Congratulations!
Thank you. I should have like all the details to that. It's happening down in Tribeca. If you want to get a hold of me, you can. I'm at Lemny. LEM_NY, both on Instagram and on Twitter, and I can give you more information on that. So that's one way to reach me. If you want to attend and you're in the city and you want to come and hang out, it's called Debauch and something else. It's about debauchery, so it's going to be some risque art pieces there. So if you're interested, I will be kind of like premiering some new works, and I'm just kind of like excited about continuing with, just building out. These aspects of finally becoming a professional artist, because I know you've been talking about that as well. I'm like, well, these people finally take me seriously, and it's kind of like you transition from other fields and you come into art, there's there's so many kind of like there's red tape, and there's a lot of kind of like impasses in terms of like gatekeeping and things like that. And when you come into the blockchain, it's kind of like you have a direct product to kind of like consumer like mainline. And so that's certainly something that I want to continue to like grow and expand upon. I was extremely like successful, thankfully, in 2021, and then I really like kind of like slowed down because I did want to be a lot more intentional about the work that I was doing and to kind of like get into kind of like analog work. So I'm have every intention of continuing with kind of like my collector base and things like that, and doing projects of that nature. So that's me in a nutshell. Thank you, Creatress, again. Yeah, that's what I'm up to.
My absolute pleasure. It was so nice to get to talk to you a little bit more one-on-one. It's been a while. So thank you for being open to it. I know you're super busy. So I really absolutely appreciate the time. And to those of you who tuned in to watch, thank you so much too. If you can, please share this interview with anyone who you think might be interested in learning a bit more about art, about this beautiful artist, and about her artwork, and about the collection. Please comment, retweet, reshare, send it over to your grandma. And thank you so much for supporting these interviews. Please do go check out the collection. We do have a couple more artworks that are available. But congratulations, Lemny, on selling out yours. And much success on all of your endeavors, especially on your upcoming show. And please share any of the info. We'll try to help, what is it called? Share it out so more people can see it. So best of luck, my dear.
Thank you so much. Likewise. Have a good day, everyone. A good night and good afternoon. Peace.
Peace.
Mm-hmm.